Princess Zarathul stood at the observation deck of her father's flagship, watching the blue marble called Earth grow larger in the viewport. Her silver skin shimmered with nervous excitement as delicate patterns of bioluminescence danced across her arms. Tomorrow she would meet her husband-to-be, a human named Marcus Chen. The Velnari Empire had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They were tall, elegant beings with crystalline horns and eyes that could see across multiple spectrums of light. Their technology was so advanced that they could reshape matter with their minds and travel between stars in the blink of an eye. To them, most other species were primitive, useful only as servants or entertainment. Humans were different, though. They had appeared in the galaxy only 200 years ago, spreading from their small blue world with surprising speed. Unlike other species that the Velnari had conquered or enslaved, humans had somehow earned a place at the negotiating table. The peace treaty signed 50 years ago had shocked everyone. Zara's father, Emperor Thelvanus, had arranged this marriage to cement the alliance. She had studied human culture extensively, reading their literature and watching their entertainment. Humans seemed so gentle and emotional compared to her people. They wrote poetry about love, created art about beauty, and their stories always seemed to focus on kindness winning over cruelty. Marcus Chen was a human diplomat, 32 years old, with kind brown eyes and a warm smile in all the photos she had seen. He spoke 7 galactic languages fluently and had spent his career preventing conflicts between species. Everything about him suggested he was exactly the type of gentle, caring human she had read about. The wedding ceremony took place on Velnari Prime, in the Crystal Palace where her ancestors had ruled for millennia. Representatives from hundreds of species attended, all wanting to witness this historic union. Marcus stood at the altar wearing traditional Velnari ceremonial robes, looking calm and respectful despite being surrounded by beings who could crush him without thinking. When Zara first saw him in person, she was struck by how ordinary he seemed, not weak exactly, but quiet. He had a presence that drew attention without demanding it. When he spoke his vows in perfect Velnari, his voice was steady but gentle. He promised to honor her, protect her, and stand beside her as they built bridges between their peoples. The reception lasted 3 days, as was traditional. Marcus navigated the complex social dynamics of the Velnari court with surprising skill. He knew exactly how to bow to each noble, which gifts to give, and when to speak or remain silent. Several times, Zara noticed him deflecting insults or provocations with humor or clever wordplay instead of taking offense. "Your human is quite diplomatic," her cousin Velthar commented during the celebration. "I expected something more primitive." Zara found herself defending Marcus, though she wasn't sure why. "Humans are more complex than we assumed. He's intelligent and well-educated." What she didn't say was how safe she felt around him. Unlike the male nobles of her own species, who often saw marriage as a way to gain power or status, Marcus seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her as a person. He asked about her hobbies, her thoughts on art and philosophy, her dreams for the future. Their first months of marriage were peaceful. They lived in a specially constructed diplomatic residence that combined human and Velnari architectural styles. Marcus had his own study filled with books from dozens of worlds, while Zara had her crystal garden where she could meditate and practice her family's traditional energy manipulation techniques. Marcus was exactly what she had expected from human culture. He brought her coffee every morning, prepared exactly how she liked it. He listened when she talked about the pressures of being an imperial princess. He never raised his voice, never showed anger, never demanded anything from her. When they disagreed about something, he would simply say, "Let's talk about this," and they would work through it together. The other humans in the diplomatic corps were similarly gentle. They organized charity drives for refugees from various conflicts. They spent their free time teaching Velnari children about Earth's music and art. They seemed genuinely committed to peace and cooperation between species. Zara began to believe that humans had evolved beyond the violent tendencies that plagued most species. Their history books mentioned wars, of course, but that seemed to be ancient history. The humans she met were scholars, artists, diplomats, and scientists. They had clearly grown beyond their primitive past. 6 months after their wedding, Zara and Marcus attended a cultural exchange event on the neutral space station Harmony Point. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered to share their art, music, and literature. It was exactly the kind of peaceful, cooperative event that humans seem to love. Marcus was in his element, moving between groups and helping translate not just languages but cultural concepts. He explained human jazz music to a group of crystalline beings who communicated through sound frequencies. He helped a delegation of plant-like creatures understand Velnari poetry. Everywhere he went, he brought people together. That evening, as they returned to their quarters on the station, Zara felt a deep contentment. This was what their marriage represented, two species learning to understand and appreciate each other. Marcus had shown her that strength didn't have to mean dominance, that intelligence didn't require cruelty. The Kethmori delegation seemed very interested in human agriculture techniques, she commented as they prepared for bed. Marcus nodded, hanging up his formal jacket. They're good people. Their homeworld is having trouble with soil depletion. I think we can help. You always think about helping, Zara observed. Is that a human trait or just you? Marcus smiled, the same gentle expression she had grown to love. Maybe a bit of both. Humans learned a long time ago that we're stronger when we work together. As they settled into bed, Zara reflected on how fortunate she was. Her arranged marriage had become a true partnership with someone who shared her values of peace and cooperation. Marcus represented the best of humanity, their wisdom, their growth, their commitment to building a better galaxy. She had no idea that in less than 72 hours, she would see a side of humanity that would change everything she thought she knew about the species she had married into. The gentle diplomat sleeping beside her carried within him the same fire that had once turned Earth's enemies to ash and driven humanity from a single world to an empire of stars. But for now, in the quiet darkness of their quarters, all she knew was peace. The attack came without warning during the third day of the cultural exchange. Zara was attending a poetry reading in the station's main amphitheater when the lights flickered and died. Emergency illumination cast everything in an eerie red glow as alarms began shrieking throughout Harmony Point. Hull breach in sectors 7 through 12, the station's AI announced in multiple languages. All personnel evacuate to emergency shelters immediately. Chaos erupted in the amphitheater. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species pushed toward the exits, their different biologies creating a nightmare of confusion. The crystalline Silthani moved slowly but couldn't be rushed without shattering. The gaseous Nephrim needed special breathing apparatus. The massive Gorthak simply couldn't fit through standard doorways quickly. Zara felt a strong hand grip her arm. Marcus appeared beside her, no longer the gentle diplomat she knew. His eyes had changed, becoming sharp and calculating as they swept the room, analyzing threats and escape routes. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice carrying an authority she had never heard before. "Don't let go of my hand no matter what happens." Before she could ask what was wrong, the far wall of the amphitheater exploded inward. Through the breach came figures in black armor, their weapons firing indiscriminately into the crowd. Zara recognized them immediately. Korthvan Raiders, one of the most vicious pirate groups in the galaxy. The Korthvan were a parasitic species that survived by raiding other civilizations. They had no homeworld, no fixed territory, just fleets of ships that appeared without warning to steal, kill, and destroy. Most species simply paid them tribute rather than fight, because the cost of war with the Korthovan was always higher than whatever they demanded. Marcus pulled Zara behind an overturned table as energy blasts seared the air above their heads. All around them, people were screaming, dying, or desperately trying to reach the exits. The Korthvan moved through the crowd like reapers, their weapons cutting down anyone who moved too slowly. "We need to reach the emergency pods," Marcus said, his voice calm despite the carnage around them. "The main evacuation routes are compromised." "How do you know?" Zara asked, but Marcus was already moving. He led her through the chaos with an efficiency that seemed impossible. Every turn he made avoided the heaviest fighting. Every route he chose somehow stayed clear of Korthvan squads. It was as if he could predict where the enemies would be before they got there. They reached a service corridor that Zara hadn't even noticed before. Marcus produced a small device from his pocket, something that definitely wasn't standard diplomatic equipment, and used it to override the security lock. "Marcus, how did you—" "Questions later," he said, guiding her into the corridor. Survival now. They made their way through maintenance tunnels that Marcus seemed to know by heart. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew closer. The Korthovan were efficient killers, and Harmony Point security forces were designed for peacekeeping, not warfare. They emerged near the station's communication center, where they found a group of Korthven trying to hack into the main communication array. If they succeeded, they could call in their main fleet and turn this raid into a full-scale massacre. Marcus studied the situation for exactly 3 seconds, then turned to Zara. When she looked into his eyes, she saw something that made her blood freeze. The gentle, caring human she had married was gone. In his place was something cold, calculating, and utterly dangerous. "Stay here," he said. "Don't move until I come back. Marcus, there are 6 of them and they're armed. You're a diplomat." He was already moving. What happened next challenged everything Zara thought she knew about human capabilities. Marcus didn't fight like the warriors of her people, who relied on superior technology and energy manipulation. He didn't fight like the Korthven, who used brute force and overwhelming firepower. Marcus fought like physics itself had decided someone needed to die. He moved through the Korthven squad like water flowing around rocks. Except every place he touched, something broke. A touch to one raider's throat ended with the creature collapsing, unable to breathe. A simple grab and twist of another's weapon hand resulted in bones snapping with sounds Zara could hear from 30 feet away. The Korthven were experienced killers, veterans of hundreds of raids. They adapted quickly, trying to surround Marcus, use their superior numbers and firepower. It didn't matter. Marcus seemed to know where each shot would be fired before the trigger was pulled. He used their own weapons against them, turning their formation into a liability. In less than 90 seconds, 6 heavily armed Korthven raiders were dead or unconscious, and Marcus was calmly checking the communication array to make sure it was undamaged. "Clear," he called to Zara, his voice returning to its normal gentle tone as if nothing had happened. Zara approached slowly, staring at the carnage around her. These weren't humans who had been killed by superior technology or overwhelming force. These were experienced killers who had been systematically dismantled by someone who understood violence on a level that scared her. "Marcus," she said carefully. "What are you?" He looked at her, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes that made her understand why humanity had earned a place at the galactic table, despite being so young and apparently primitive. It wasn't because they were peaceful. It was because they were so good at war that other species had decided it was safer to negotiate with them. "I'm your husband," Marcus said simply, "and I'm a diplomat." "Those things haven't changed. Diplomats don't fight like that." Marcus began working on the communication array, his movements precise and confident. "Human diplomats do. We're trained for situations like this because peace only works when people know the cost of breaking it." Alarms were still blaring throughout the station, but the sounds of battle were changing. Instead of the chaos of a massacre, Zara could hear the organized reports of professional soldiers taking control of the situation. "The cavalry?" she asked. Marcus nodded toward the communication array he had just finished repairing. "I sent out a priority distress signal. Human fleet units were conducting exercises 2 systems over. They should be docking in about 15 minutes. You called for human military ships?" "The Korthven understand strength," Marcus explained, helping her step over the unconscious raiders. "Harmony Point security forces are excellent at keeping the peace, but they're not equipped for this kind of assault. Sometimes you need people who are very good at breaking things." As they made their way toward the main evacuation area, Zara found herself looking at Marcus with completely new eyes. The gentle, caring diplomat was still there, but underneath was something that had been hidden from her. She began to wonder what else about humanity she had misunderstood. "Marcus," she said as they reached the evacuation area where survivors were being treated by medical teams, "when this is over, I think we need to have a very long conversation about human history." Marcus squeezed her hand gently, the same caring gesture he had made 1,000 times before. But now she noticed the calluses on his fingers, the subtle scars on his knuckles, the way his eyes never stopped scanning for threats. "I think you're right," he said. "There are some things about my people that don't make it into the cultural exchange programs." The human fleet arrived exactly when Marcus had predicted. Zara watched from the observation deck as sleek warships appeared in space around Harmony Point, moving with a precision that made her father's legendary navy look clumsy by comparison. The lead ship was something she had never seen before, a vessel that seemed to bend light around itself, making it difficult to look at directly. When she asked Marcus about it, he simply said it was a diplomatic escort vessel and changed the subject. Within hours, the Korthvan raiders who had survived the assault were in custody, the station was secure, and medical teams were treating the wounded with technology that seemed impossibly advanced. Zara noticed that the human medics were using healing devices that rivaled anything in the Velnari Empire's arsenal. I thought humans were still developing their medical technology, she commented to Marcus as they watched a human doctor regrow a Silthani's shattered crystal limb in real time. We are, Marcus replied. This is just our battlefield medicine. We've learned to get very good at fixing what gets broken. The casualty reports told a story that chilled Zara to her core. In the initial attack, over 300 beings had been killed or wounded. After the human military arrived, not a single person died from their injuries. The difference wasn't just medical technology. It was the efficiency of beings who had clearly dealt with this kind of violence before. Admiral Sarah Chen, Marcus's older sister, arrived on the station to personally debrief the survivors. Zara had met her briefly at the wedding, where she had seemed like another gentle human, talking about her children and her garden on Earth. Now, watching her coordinate the investigation into the attack, Zara saw the same transformation she had witnessed in Marcus. Your Highness? Admiral Chen said when she approached their table in the station's temporary command center. I'm sorry you had to experience this. Korthvan raiders have been growing bolder lately. How did you respond so quickly? Zara asked. Marcus said you were conducting exercises 2 systems away, but you arrived as if you had been waiting for something like this. Admiral Chen exchanged a look with Marcus that lasted exactly 2 seconds, but somehow contained an entire conversation. We've been tracking this particular Korthvan fleet for several months. Intelligence suggested they might target Harmony Point. You knew this was going to happen? We suspected something might happen, Marcus corrected. That's why I made sure we had emergency protocols in place. Zara realized that Marcus had known this attack was possible from the moment they arrived at Harmony Point. His gentle behavior, his focus on cultural exchange, his apparent lack of concern about security, all of it had been a performance while he quietly prepared for exactly what had occurred. How long have you been expecting this? She asked. The Korthvan have been probing neutral stations for weaknesses for over a year, Admiral Chen explained. This attack was always a matter of when, not if. And you didn't think to warn anyone? Marcus leaned forward, his expression becoming serious. Zara, if we had warned the station authorities, what would have happened? She thought about it. They would have increased security, maybe postponed the cultural exchange. And the Korthvan would have noticed the increased security and picked a different target. Somewhere less defended with fewer resources to respond. Somewhere where we couldn't save as many people. The implications hit her like a physical blow. You used Harmony Point as bait. We used Harmony Point as a trap, Admiral Chen corrected. The Korthvan needed to be stopped, and this was the best opportunity to do it with minimal casualties. Zara stood up abruptly, her bioluminescent patterns flashing with anger. Minimal casualties. Hundreds of people were killed or wounded, and without our intervention, thousands would have died when the Korthvan hit their next target. Marcus said quietly. Sometimes the choice isn't between good and bad. Sometimes it's between bad and worse. You manipulated everyone. You manipulated me. Marcus stood as well, and for the first time since their marriage, Zara saw real emotion in his eyes. Not the gentle patience she was used to, but something fiercer and more complex. I protected you. I protected everyone I could. And yes, I did it by making choices that you're not going to like. Did our entire marriage mean nothing to you? Was I just part of some diplomatic mission? The question hung in the air between them. Admiral Chen quietly excused herself, leaving them alone in the command center surrounded by the organized chaos of a military operation. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying Zara's face as if trying to memorize it. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. 6 months ago, when I first saw your picture in the diplomatic briefings, I thought this marriage was going to be the hardest assignment of my career. I expected to spend the rest of my life pretending to care about someone while maintaining a political alliance. Zara felt her anger faltering despite herself. But you're not what I expected, Marcus continued. You're intelligent and curious and genuinely kind. You care about art and philosophy and making the galaxy a better place. You've never once used your position to hurt someone or gain an advantage. In a universe full of people who see others as tools to be used, You see them as people to be cherished. He stepped closer, and she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of carrying secrets and making impossible choices. So yes, our marriage started as a political arrangement. And yes, I've been keeping secrets from you because that's what my job requires. But somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending to care about you and started actually caring about you. Which makes this conversation approximately 1,000 times harder than it should be. Zara studied his face, looking for signs of deception. All her life, she had been trained to read people, to spot lies and manipulation. But all she could see in Marcus's expression was honesty and a kind of pain she didn't fully understand. "What are you, really?" she asked. "I'm a diplomat," Marcus said, "but I'm also what humans call a guardian. We're trained from childhood to protect the things we care about by whatever means necessary. Most of the time that means negotiation and cultural exchange and peaceful resolution of conflicts. Sometimes it means other things, like killing 6 armed raiders with your bare hands, like making sure the people I love don't get hurt by things they don't need to know about." Zara realized that she was standing at a crossroads. She could hold on to her anger, demand complete honesty about everything, and probably destroy their relationship in the process. Or she could accept that the universe was more dangerous than she had understood, and that sometimes good people had to do terrible things to protect the people they cared about. "Show me," she said finally. "Show you what?" "Show me who humans really are. Not the gentle poets and artists and diplomats. Show me the people who made the Korthvin afraid enough to avoid human space for 50 years. Show me the species that earned a place at the galactic table despite being newcomers." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Are you sure? Because once you see it, you can't unsee it." "I'm sure." Marcus activated his communication device. "Admiral, would you please patch me through to command? Tell them Princess Zarathul has been granted security clearance level 7, full historical archives and current operational status." As they waited for the connection to go through, Marcus took her hand gently. "I love you," he said. "I need you to remember that, because some of what you're about to learn is going to be difficult to reconcile with the person you married." "I love you too," Zara replied, and realized she meant it more now than she ever had before. "And I think I'm ready to meet the real humanity." The classified archives of human history were nothing like what Zara had studied in the cultural exchange programs. As she sat in the secure briefing room aboard Admiral Chen's flagship, watching holographic displays of humanity's real expansion into the galaxy, she began to understand why so many species had chosen negotiation over confrontation with Earth. The version of human history taught in most diplomatic courses focuses on our cultural achievements, Marcus explained as the first display showed Earth's early space exploration. Art, literature, music, philosophy, all of that is true, but it's not the complete picture. The hologram shifted to show humanity's first contact with an alien species, the Zeth-Kree Confederation, a group of worlds known for enslaving primitive civilizations. According to the sanitized histories Zara had read, first contact had been peaceful, leading to trade agreements and cultural exchange. "What really happened?" she asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer wouldn't be pleasant. Admiral Chen activated a different set of displays. The Zeth-Kree saw humans as perfect candidates for slavery. We were new to space travel, had no allies, and our technology seemed primitive. They demanded we submit to their authority or face pacification. The hologram showed a Zeth-Kree fleet surrounding Earth's small space stations, their ships massive and heavily armed compared to humanity's early vessels. Any rational species would have surrendered or negotiated for better terms. "We sent them a message," Marcus continued. "We told them we appreciated their offer but would prefer to remain independent. We suggested they leave our system and never come back. And they refused. They laughed," Admiral Chen said. "Literally." The Zeth-Kree High Commander broadcast his amusement throughout their fleet. "He gave us 24 hours to surrender or watch our homeworld burn." The next series of displays showed what happened during those 24 hours. Zara watched with growing amazement as humanity's response unfolded. Hidden shipyards that had been disguised as asteroid mining operations suddenly came online. Weapons platforms that had masqueraded as scientific satellites revealed their true purpose. Ships that had appeared to be simple cargo vessels shed their outer hulls to reveal sleek warships underneath. "We had been preparing for this possibility since we first detected alien signals," Marcus explained. "Humans have a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We hoped for peaceful contact, but we prepared for war. The Zethkri fleet had outnumbered the human ships 10-1. They had superior shields, more powerful weapons, and thousands of years of military experience. The battle should have been a massacre. Instead, it lasted 18 minutes. Zara watched in stunned silence as human ships moved through the Zethkri formation like deadly phantoms. Their weapons weren't more powerful than their enemies, but they were used with a precision that seemed impossible. Every shot hit exactly where it would cause maximum damage with minimum energy expenditure. Every maneuver put them in position to support other ships while avoiding return fire. How? Zara asked. How did you defeat them so completely? We cheated, Admiral Chen said simply. The Zethkri thought they understood warfare because they had been conquering primitive species for millennia, but they had never fought anyone who was actually trying to win. Marcus activated another display showing the tactical breakdown of the battle. Most species fight wars the way they fight duels, with honor, following rules, using traditional strategies. Humans fight wars like our survival depends on it, because it usually does. We used their own tactics against them, Admiral Chen continued. They relied on intimidation and overwhelming force, so we let them think they had won right up until the moment we destroyed their entire fleet. We studied their formation protocols, hacked their communication systems, and turned their numerical advantage into a liability. But the official records say there was a peaceful resolution. There was, Marcus interrupted. After we destroyed their military fleet, we opened negotiations with the Zethkri government. We offered them trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and mutual defense pacts. We just made it very clear that slavery was not on the table. The displays shifted to show the aftermath of the battle. Instead of conquering Zethkri territory or demanding reparations, humanity had indeed offered genuine partnerships. The Zethkri, shocked by their devastating defeat, had agreed to treat humans as equals rather than potential slaves. This pattern repeated itself over the next 50 years. Admiral Chen explained. Every species that tried to dominate or exploit humanity learned the same lesson. We don't start fights, but we finish them. Zara studied the tactical displays, beginning to understand the scope of what she was seeing.
How many species have you had to
educate? 17 major confrontations, Marcus replied. Hundreds of smaller incidents. Each time we offered peaceful resolution first. Each time we made it clear that aggression against humanity or our allies would be met with overwhelming force. Your allies. The display changed to show a map of current galactic politics. Zara was amazed to see how many species had formal defense agreements with Earth. Not just trade partnerships or cultural exchanges, but actual military alliances. Humans are very good at making friends, Admiral Chen said with a slight smile, especially among species that have been bullied by larger powers. We have a tendency to adopt underdogs. The Korthvan, Zara realized. They've been avoiding human space because the last time they raided a human colony, we hunted down their entire fleet and gave them a choice. Stop raiding civilian populations or stop existing. Marcus finished. They chose to stop raiding civilian populations mostly. Today's attack was a test, Admiral Chen explained. They wanted to see if we would respond as quickly to threats against non-human civilians. We wanted to make sure they understood that our protection extends to our friends and allies. Zara leaned back in her chair, trying to process everything she had learned. The gentle, artistic, philosophical humans she had studied were real. They just coexisted with a military capability that rivaled or exceeded anything in the galaxy. Why hide this? She asked. Why not let everyone know how powerful you are? Wouldn't that prevent conflicts like today's attack? Marcus and his sister exchanged another one of their meaningful looks. Because fear and respect are different things, Marcus said finally. If everyone knew the full extent of human military capabilities, they wouldn't see us as partners to be trusted. They would see us as threats to be contained or destroyed. We learned that lesson from our own history, Admiral Chen added. On Earth, the most powerful nations weren't always the most popular ones. Power without restraint leads to isolation and eventual rebellion. So instead, we present ourselves as we actually are most of the time, Marcus continued. Diplomats, artists, scientists, philosophers. People who prefer cooperation to conflict. We just make sure that anyone who forces us into conflict understands the cost. Zara looked at the tactical displays still floating in the air around them. 18 minutes to destroy a fleet that should have been able to conquer Earth. And that had been 50 years ago, when humanity was still new to galactic politics. "How powerful are you now?" she asked. Admiral Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Strong enough that species like the Korthvan test our borders instead of our core worlds. Strong enough that your father chose to offer marriage alliance rather than military conquest. Strong enough that most of our neighbors prefer to solve their problems through negotiation, rather than find out what happens when they don't. And strong enough," Marcus added, reaching for Zara's hand, "to make sure that the people we care about don't have to worry about things like Korthvan raiders or aggressive empires or any of the other unpleasant realities of galactic politics." Zara squeezed his hand, finally understanding the weight he had been carrying throughout their marriage. He had been protecting not just her, but her entire perception of the universe, the gentle, optimistic galaxy where conflicts were resolved through cultural exchange and mutual understanding. That galaxy existed because humans like Marcus worked tirelessly to maintain it. "Have one more question," she said. "Ask it. If someone threatened me directly, not as a political move or to test human resolve, but because they specifically wanted to hurt me, what would happen to them?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but carried an undertone that made Zara's silver skin shimmer with something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite excitement. "They would learn why predators avoid human space," he said, "and they would learn it very, very quickly." 3 months after the Harmony Point incident, Zara thought she had adjusted to her new understanding of humanity. Marcus was still the same caring husband, still brought her coffee in the morning, still listened patiently when she talked about her research into interspecies philosophy. But now she could see the subtle signs she had missed before, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, how he always positioned himself between her and potential threats, the slight bulge under his diplomatic jacket where he carried weapons that definitely weren't standard issue. Their life had returned to a comfortable routine until the day her cousin Velthar decided to visit their diplomatic residence. Velthar was everything Zara disliked about Velnari nobility. He was arrogant, entitled, and viewed other species as inherently inferior to their own. He had opposed her marriage to Marcus from the beginning, arguing that it weakened the Empire's position by suggesting they needed allies rather than simply taking what they wanted. "Cousin," Velthar said as he strode into their home without invitation, his crystalline horns gleaming with embedded circuits that enhanced his natural psychic abilities. "I see you're still playing house with your pet human." Zara felt her bioluminescent patterns flare with anger. "Marcus is my husband and your equal in diplomatic rank. You will show him respect." Velthar laughed, a sound like crystal chimes being shattered. "Respect? For a primitive primate? Zara, this charade has gone on long enough. Father has decided it's time for you to return home and make a proper marriage with someone of your own species." Marcus appeared in the doorway carrying a tray of tea for their unexpected guest. His movements were calm and controlled, showing no reaction to Veltar's insults. "Your Excellence," he said formally, offering a precise bow. "Welcome to our home. May I offer you refreshment?" Veltar ignored the offer and instead activated his psychic enhancers. Immediately, Zara felt the pressure of his mental abilities pressing against her consciousness. Not enough to actually harm her, but enough to demonstrate his power. "Tell me, human," Veltar said, his voice carrying psychic harmonics that would normally force most species to experience fear and submission. "Do you truly believe you're worthy of a princess of the Empire? Or are you simply enjoying your brief time as an exotic pet?" Marcus set the tea tray down carefully and turned to face Veltar. Zara expected to see him struggling against the psychic pressure, perhaps showing signs of discomfort or intimidation. Instead, Marcus looked completely unaffected, as if Velthar's considerable mental abilities were having no impact whatsoever. "I believe," Marcus said quietly, "that worth isn't determined by species or birthright, but by how we choose to treat others. Your Excellence." The last two words carried just enough emphasis to make it clear that Marcus understood exactly what kind of demonstration of power Velthar was attempting. Velthar's eyes narrowed, and Zara felt the psychic pressure increase dramatically. Most beings would be on their knees by now, overwhelmed by the telepathic assault. Marcus remained standing, apparently completely unaffected. "Interesting," Veltar mused. "Either humans have better mental defenses than we assumed, or you're simply too primitive to understand what's happening to you." "Perhaps," Marcus replied. "It's a third option. Without warning, something changed in the room's atmosphere. Zara couldn't put her finger on what exactly was different, but suddenly the space felt smaller, more dangerous. Velthar's psychic pressure didn't decrease, but it seemed to be meeting something that pushed back just as hard. "What are you?" Velthar demanded, his arrogance faltering for the first time since his arrival. Marcus smiled, the same gentle expression Zara had seen 1,000 times before. "I'm a diplomat, Your Excellence, though I should mention that human diplomatic training covers a rather wide range of scenarios." Velthar tried to intensify his psychic assault, pouring more power into the attempt to dominate Marcus's mind. For a moment, the air itself seemed to vibrate with the force of his mental abilities. Then abruptly, the pressure stopped. Not because Velthar had chosen to stop, but because something had made it impossible for him to continue. "You see," Marcus continued conversationally, as if nothing unusual was happening, "humans developed some interesting capabilities during our early expansion into space. When you regularly encounter species with powerful psychic abilities, you learn to adapt." Velthar stumbled backward, his face showing shock and growing fear. "Impossible. Humans don't have psychic capabilities." "You're absolutely right," Marcus agreed. "We don't. But we do have something else." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Zara realized that Marcus wasn't fighting Velthar's psychic abilities with mental powers of his own. Instead, he was doing something that she didn't fully understand, but that was clearly having a devastating effect on her cousin. "We have will," Marcus said, stepping closer to Velthar. "Pure, focused, unbreakable will. Most species develop psychic abilities because they need them to impose their desires on reality. Humans learn to impose our desires on reality through sheer determination." Velthar tried to back away but found himself unable to move, not because anything was physically restraining him, but because Marcus's presence had become so overwhelming that retreat seemed impossible. "The funny thing about psychic abilities," Marcus continued, "is that they depend on the belief that they work. They're a form of mental leverage. You push against someone's mind and expect it to give way. But what happens when you try to use leverage against something that simply refuses to move?" Zara watched in amazement as her cousin, one of the most powerful psychics in the Velnari Empire, began to shake with fear in the presence of a human who claimed to have no psychic abilities at all. "Stop," Velthar whispered. "I'm not doing anything to you," Marcus replied, which was technically true. "I'm simply being myself. If that's uncomfortable for you, perhaps you should reconsider your approach to this conversation." For nearly a minute, the two beings faced each other in silence. Then gradually Marcus stepped back and the oppressive atmosphere in the room began to fade. "Now then," Marcus said, returning to his normal gentle tone, "would you like some tea? I find refreshment helps after intense conversations." Velthar stared at him for a long moment, then turned to Zara. "Cousin," he said carefully, "I believe I may have misunderstood the nature of your marriage." "I believe you may have misunderstood several things," Zara replied, surprised by how calm her own voice sounded, "including the message my husband just chose not to send to your father about this visit." "What message?" Marcus picked up the tea tray again, his movements casual and relaxed. "Oh, just a routine diplomatic report about potential complications in our alliance. Nothing that can't be avoided if we all continue to treat each other with appropriate respect." The threat was delivered so politely that it took Velthar several seconds to understand what he had just heard. When he did, his expression shifted from fear to something approaching terror. "You would dare threaten the Empire?" "I would dare protect my wife," Marcus corrected, "from anyone who might wish to harm her or undermine her happiness. The scope of that protection is entirely up to the people who might be considering such actions." Velthar looked between Marcus and Zara, clearly trying to process what had just happened. Finally, he bowed formally to both of them. "Please forgive my earlier comments," he said stiffly. "I spoke from ignorance and will ensure that my father understands the true nature of your partnership." "Apology accepted," Zara said graciously. "I'm sure this was simply a misunderstanding between family members." After Velthar left, Marcus set the tea tray down and turned to Zara with an expression of genuine concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I know that was intense, and I'm sorry you had to see it." "Marcus," Zara said slowly, "what exactly did you just do to him?" "Nothing harmful," Marcus assured her. I just made it clear that bullying you or me wasn't going to work out the way he expected. But how? You said humans don't have psychic abilities. Marcus sat down beside her, taking her hands gently. We don't, but we do have something that most species with psychic powers have forgotten how to use. Which is? Absolute conviction. When a human decides that something is going to happen or not happen, we don't negotiate with reality. We don't consider alternatives. We simply make reality conform to our decision. Zara studied his face, seeing the same gentle expression she had fallen in love with, but now understanding that underneath it was something utterly implacable. Is that why humans are so successful in the galaxy? Because you refuse to accept defeat? Marcus smiled, and this time she could see both sides of him in that expression. The diplomat and the guardian, the poet and the warrior, the gentle husband and the being who could break psychic nobles with nothing but willpower. Among other reasons, he said, but mostly we're successful because we choose what we're willing to fight for very carefully. And once we choose, nothing in the universe can make us change our minds. 6 months later, Zara believed she had finally seen the full extent of human capabilities. She had witnessed Marcus in combat, seen the classified military archives, and watched him break a powerful psychic through sheer force of will. She thought she understood what humanity was capable of when, pushed to their limits, then the Devourers returned to the galaxy. Zara was attending a session of the Galactic Council when the emergency session was called. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the vast chamber, their worried voices creating a cacophony of fear in dozens of languages. At the center of the assembly, a holographic display showed something that chilled every being present to their core. The edge of the galaxy was going dark. Not from some natural phenomenon, but because entire star systems were being systematically consumed by an enemy that had been thought extinct for over 1,000 years. The Devourer ships were first detected 6 months ago, announced High Counselor Vrathek, his ancient voice carrying across the chamber. We had hoped they were isolated scouts, remnants of their ancient defeat. We were wrong. The hologram shifted to show long-range sensor data. Massive ships, each the size of a small moon, were moving through space in formation. Behind them, star systems that had existed for billions of years were reduced to empty void. How many? Asked the representative from the Crystalline Confederacy, her harmonic voice tight with fear. Our best estimates suggest a fleet of at least 10,000 vessels, possibly more. They appeared to be following the same expansion pattern that nearly destroyed galactic civilization during the First Devourer War. Zara had studied the First Devourer War in her historical classes. The Devourers were an ancient artificial intelligence that had achieved sentience billions of years ago. They consumed entire solar systems to fuel their expansion, turning planets and stars into raw material for their ever-growing fleet. It had taken the combined efforts of every major species in the galaxy to barely defeat them, and even then only by using weapons so destructive that they were banned from ever being created again. What is the current response status? Asked Emperor Thelvanus, Zara's father, his mental voice projected into the chamber. All major fleets are mobilizing, High Counselor Vrathek replied. However, our preliminary engagements have been unsuccessful. The Devourers appear to have adapted to the tactics used against them in the ancient war. Their defensive capabilities have improved significantly. Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of species were already calculating evacuation routes and defensive positions. The mathematics were grim. If the Devourers continued at their current pace, they would reach the core worlds within 2 years. What about the prohibited weapons? Asked someone from the back of the chamber. The planet killers used in the First War? Destroyed or sealed away, Vrathek replied. And even if we could access them, intelligence suggests the Devourers have developed countermeasures. That was when Marcus stood up. Zara hadn't even noticed him enter the chamber. But there he was in the section reserved for human diplomats, looking calm and thoughtful as chaos erupted around him. Honored Counselor, Marcus said, his voice somehow carrying clearly despite not being amplified. Has anyone consulted with Earth regarding this situation? A ripple of confused murmurs went through the chamber. Several representatives made sounds that Zara had learned to recognize as laughter in their respective species. Ambassador Chen, Vrathek replied with the patience usually reserved for addressing children. While we appreciate humanity's offer to assist, This is a threat that requires the combined military might of the entire galaxy. Perhaps Earth could contribute to refugee relocation efforts. Respectfully, Marcus interrupted, I don't think you understand what I'm asking. He activated his personal communicator, and suddenly the chamber's main display changed. Instead of showing Devourer fleet movements, it now displayed what appeared to be a countdown timer. 72 hours ago, Marcus continued, Earth's deep space monitoring stations detected the Devourer return. 60 hours ago, the Human Defense Council voted unanimously to implement the Orion Protocol. The chamber fell silent. No one had ever heard of the Orion Protocol. 36 hours ago, Marcus said, his voice taking on the tone Zara had learned to associate with very bad news for humanity's enemies. The first phase of operation was completed. 12 hours ago, we began final positioning. The countdown you're seeing represents the time remaining until Phase 2 implementation. High Counselor Vrathek's tentacles twitched with confusion. Ambassador, what exactly is the Orion Protocol? Marcus smiled, and Zara felt a familiar chill run down her spine. She had seen that particular expression before, right before the Korthvan raiders learned that humans took threats to their allies very personally. The Orion Protocol, Marcus explained, is humanity's contingency plan for existential threats to galactic civilization. We developed it after studying the records of the First Devourer War, and concluding that conventional military responses would be insufficient if the Devourers ever returned. What kind of contingency plan? Emperor Thelvanus demanded. The kind that works, Marcus replied simply. The countdown timer reached 0. Every being in the chamber felt it at the same moment. A subtle change in the fabric of space itself, as if the universe had suddenly taken a deep breath and held it. The main display shifted to show long-range sensors focused on the edge of the galaxy, where the Devourer fleet had been steadily advancing. The fleet was gone, not destroyed, not scattered, simply gone, as if 10,000 moon-sized ships had never existed. What did you do? Whispered High Counselor Vrathek. We removed them, Marcus said matter-of-factly. The Devourers operate by converting matter and energy into computational substrate. They're essentially a very large, very aggressive computer program, so we introduced them to a logic paradox specifically designed to cause recursive system failures in artificial intelligences of their type. You destroyed them with mathematics? We convinced them to destroy themselves with mathematics, Marcus corrected. Every Devourer ship that tried to process the paradox cascaded into total system failure. The effect spread through their network faster than they could isolate it. The chamber erupted in voices as representatives tried to understand what they had just witnessed. Zara stared at her husband, realizing that humanity had just solved a galactic crisis that everyone else had considered unsolvable, and they had done it in less than 3 days. How? Demanded the representative from the warrior clans of Zerion. How did you develop a weapon capable of defeating the Devourers when the combined might of the ancient galaxy could barely stop them? Marcus's expression became thoughtful. Because we approached the problem differently. Everyone else tried to fight the Devourers the way you fight a conventional enemy, with ships and weapons and tactical superiority. We fought them the way you fight a computer virus. But how did you know it would work? We tested it, Admiral Chen said, entering the chamber with a tablet full of data. Extensively. We've been running simulations of Devourer psychology and behavior for the past 50 years. Ever since we first learned about them, we knew that if they ever returned, conventional weapons would be useless. 50 years. High Counselor Vrathek's voice was faint with shock. You've been preparing for this for 50 years? We've been preparing for a lot of things for 50 years, Marcus replied. Humans have a tendency to assume that if something bad happened once, it will probably happen again. We like to be ready. Zara stood up slowly, her mind reeling from what she had just witnessed. Marcus, she said carefully, are there other protocols? Other contingency plans for threats we haven't thought of? Marcus looked at her with the expression of someone who loved her too much to lie, but also too much to tell her the complete truth. There are always contingency plans, he said softly. Humans learned a long time ago that the universe is a dangerous place, and safety comes from being prepared for dangers you hope you'll never face. Around the chamber, representatives were beginning to understand that they had just witnessed something unprecedented. Humanity hadn't just solved the Devourer crisis, they had solved it so completely that the greatest threat to galactic civilization had been eliminated before most people even knew it existed. How many other threats have you eliminated without telling us? Emperor Thelvanus asked, his mental voice carrying a mixture of gratitude and growing concern. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle, but carried an undertone that made every being in the chamber pay attention. Your Majesty, he said, the peace you've enjoyed for the past 50 years wasn't an accident. There are things in the dark between the stars that want to hurt the people we care about. Humans make sure those things stay in the dark. As the session adjourned and representatives filed out in stunned silence, Zara remained seated beside Marcus, trying to process what she had learned. Her gentle diplomatic husband was part of a species that had been quietly protecting the entire galaxy from threats that others couldn't even imagine. How mass to make sure that 1 year after the Devourer crisis, Zara thought she had finally accepted the full truth about humanity. They were guardians, protectors, beings who had dedicated themselves to maintaining galactic peace through careful preparation and overwhelming response to threats. She had learned to live with the knowledge that her gentle husband was part of something vast and implacable that worked tirelessly to keep the universe safe. Then she discovered she was pregnant. The news should have been purely joyful. Human Velnari hybrid children were extremely rare but not impossible, and both species were genetically compatible enough to produce healthy offspring. Marcus was overjoyed, spending hours talking to her still flat stomach and reading human literature aloud to their unborn child. But as her pregnancy progressed, Zara began to notice changes that went beyond normal hybrid development. The child in her womb seemed to be growing faster than either human or Velnari children should. More concerning, her own abilities were changing. Her natural bioluminescence was becoming brighter, more controlled. Her telepathic sensitivity, already strong by Velnari standards, was growing exponentially. It's normal for pregnancy to enhance natural abilities, Marcus assured her when she brought up her concerns. Human mothers often experience increased intuition and emotional sensitivity. It makes sense that your telepathic abilities would strengthen too, but the changes kept accelerating. By her 5th month, Zara could sense the thoughts of everyone within 100 meters. By her 6th month, she could feel the emotional states of people on different levels of their building. And the baby was aware, not just moving and responding to stimuli, but actively thinking, processing information, making decisions. Marcus, she said one evening as they sat in their garden, our child is going to be something unprecedented, isn't it? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hand resting gently on her swollen belly. Yes, he said finally. We think so. We? Human scientists have been studying the theoretical possibilities of human psychic species hybridization for decades. The mathematical models suggested that the offspring might exhibit capabilities that exceed either parent species individually. Zara felt a familiar chill of recognition. This wasn't an accident, was it? Our marriage, the timing of our pregnancy, this was planned. Marcus turned to face her, and she saw pain in his eyes along with something she hadn't seen before, hope so fierce it was almost frightening. Not our love, he said quickly. That was never planned or manipulated. Our feelings for each other are completely genuine. But the possibility that we might have children together, yes, that was always part of the long-term strategic planning. Strategic planning for what? Before Marcus could answer, Zara felt something that made her blood freeze. A presence at the edge of her expanded consciousness, something vast and malevolent that was moving toward their world with deliberate intent. Not ships or fleets, but something else, something that existed in the spaces between thoughts, in the dark corners of minds that sapient beings tried never to explore. Marcus, she whispered, there's something coming. Marcus was on his feet instantly, his communication device already in his hand. Admiral Chen, this is Priority Alpha. The Mindbreakers are moving. Repeat, the Mindbreakers are moving towards Sector 7. Even through her fear, Zara noticed that Marcus had known exactly what she was, sensing before she could even describe it. You've been watching for them, she said. We've been watching for them since we first encountered a species. With strong telepathic abilities, Marcus replied, still talking rapidly into his communicator. The Mindbreakers are drawn to psychic emanations like moths to flame. Strong telepathic civilizations tend to attract their attention eventually. What are they? Marcus finished his communication and turned back to her, his expression grim. Think of them as psychic parasites that exist in higher dimensions. They feed on consciousness itself, breaking down the barriers between individual minds until entire populations become part of their collective intelligence. They're one of the reasons most telepathic species eventually go extinct. Zara felt the presence growing stronger, closer. Whatever the mind-breakers were, they were specifically targeting her world, drawn by the increasing psychic energy she had been unconsciously broadcasting. How do you fight something like that? Usually you don't, Marcus said. Most species try to hide from them, suppress their psychic abilities, hope they pass by without notice. That strategy works until it doesn't. But humanity has a different approach? Marcus smiled, but this time the expression was predatory, in a way that made her earlier glimpses of human capability seem gentle by comparison. Humanity has always had a different approach to predators, he said. We don't hide from them. We make them afraid to hunt us. Over the next 6 hours, Zara watched humanity implement what they called the Perseus Protocol. Ships began arriving in their system, not the sleek diplomatic vessels she was used to seeing, but massive constructs that seemed to bend space around themselves. Human personnel filled their residence, setting up equipment that hummed with energies she couldn't identify. The mind-breakers exist partially in psychic space, explained Dr. Sarah Kim, a human neuroscientist who had arrived with the first wave of ships. They're vulnerable to psychic attacks, but they're also incredibly powerful. Most telepathic species can't generate enough focused mental energy to actually hurt them. But humans aren't telepathic, Zara said. No, Dr. Kim agreed. But we are stubborn, and we've learned to weaponize stubbornness in some very creative ways. The equipment in their home was designed to amplify and focus human willpower in the same way a laser-focused light. Instead of trying to fight the mind-breakers with telepathic energy, humanity would attack them with pure, concentrated human determination. The theory, Dr. Kim continued, is that human mental resilience, when properly amplified, can actually damage entities that exist primarily in psychic space. We've never tested it on mind-breakers specifically, but the mathematical models suggest it should work. Should work? Marcus took her hand gently. Zara, I need you to understand something. The Perseus Protocol has never been fully implemented before. We're about to attempt something that has never been tried in galactic history, which is, we're going to teach the mind-breakers to be afraid of humanity. The battle, when it came, was unlike anything Zara had ever imagined. The mind-breakers attacked through psychic space, trying to overwhelm her mind and use her as an anchor to pull themselves fully into normal reality. She felt them pressing against her consciousness, alien thoughts trying to merge with her own, attempting to break down the barriers that made her an individual. Then humanity struck back. The amplification equipment activated, and suddenly Zara felt the combined willpower of thousands of human minds focused into a single, unbreakable refusal. Not telepathic energy, but something more fundamental. The absolute human rejection of being consumed, controlled, or defeated. The mind-breakers, accustomed to feeding on psychic energy and telepathic thought, suddenly found themselves trying to digest something that actively fought back. Human consciousness, when properly weaponized, wasn't just indigestible, it was toxic to entities that existed by consuming other minds. No, she heard Marcus say, though he was speaking directly into psychic space rather than aloud. You don't get to hurt her. You don't get to hurt our child. You don't get to exist in our reality. The word no became a weapon. Not an argument or a plea, but an absolute statement of fact backed by the full weight of human stubbornness. The mind-breakers, confused and wounded by this unprecedented resistance, tried to retreat back to higher dimensions. They found their escape routes cut off. You made a mistake, Admiral Chen's voice echoed through psychic space. You threatened something we care about. Now you get to learn what happens when you do that. Over the next several hours, humanity systematically hunted down and destroyed entities that had terrorized telepathic civilizations for millions of years, not through superior psychic abilities or ancient weapons, but through sheer, bloody-minded refusal to allow them to continue existing. When it was over, the mind-breakers were gone. Not just from their system, but from the galaxy entirely. Humanity had taught them that psychic predation came with consequences they couldn't survive. Zara sat in their garden afterward, feeling her unborn child moving peacefully in her womb, no longer agitated by the presence of entities that wanted to devour its developing consciousness. Marcus, she said finally, What are we raising? A child who will never have to fear the things that hunt in the dark between minds, Marcus replied. A child who will inherit the best qualities of both our species, along with the protection of a civilization that refuses to let monsters exist. And if our child develops abilities that surpass both humans and Velnari? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since she had known him, the expression was purely gentle, without any hint of the dangerous capabilities that lurked beneath. Then they'll grow up in a universe where their parents made sure there was nothing left to threaten them, he said. They'll be free to use their abilities to build rather than defend, to explore rather than fight, to create beauty rather than prepare for war. Zara felt what,